Did you know that a huge and devastating volcano explosion occurred in early 2022? Well, if you haven't heard about it, this video's for you. This eruption was the largest we have experienced in the 21st century. It was so powerful that it produced shock waves that propagated across the entire world. But what if I told you that this was not some rare occurrence? In fact, even more devastating eruptions have taken place before. For instance, in 2018, another underwater volcano erupted off the coast of France's Mayotte island. But why does a volcano erupt so violently? And what exactly is an underwater volcano? Let's find out. Well, I bet you understand this video will be about volcanoes, especially underwater volcanoes. In order to understand what an underwater volcano is, it might be useful to talk about the differences between a normal one and an underwater one. Many volcanoes start out on land, rising above the surrounding landscape, but many more volcanoes get their start at the bottom of the ocean. These underwater volcanoes, or submarine volcanoes, can eventually grow into islands that rise above the surface of the ocean. To date, geologists think there are more than 5,000 active underwater volcanoes. If this is true, underwater volcanoes account for more than 75% of the total lava that erupts every year. Most of these underwater volcanoes are located among the mid-ocean ridges, where the Earth's tectonic plates are spreading apart, and they are very deep underwater. Therefore, most of the time, they are difficult to study, but in some lucky cases, they are located in more shallow water. An underwater volcano erupts differently than a surface volcano. This is because there is an unlimited amount of water to cool down the lava. What happens is that a shell of rock hardens around the lava almost immediately, creating a type of formation called pillow lava. We know volcanoes build over time, and underwater volcanoes go through the same process, so they build themselves in a similar fashion. The height of an underwater volcano grows dramatically and eventually reaches the surface of the ocean. This is, for example, what happened to form the Hawaiian Islands. Isn't it amazing? The Earth's crust has drifted above an active vent, creating each of the islands in turn. A new Hawaiian island, Loahi, is forming under the ocean about 48 kilometers off the southeast coast of Hawaii. It's already taller than Mount St. Helens and will breach the surface in a few 100,000 years. As I said, the fact that they are underwater makes submarine volcanoes difficult to study. Only a few active sites have been studied in detail due to their inherent inaccessibility. Scientists working on land can learn about the history of a volcano by visiting the volcano site and gathering data. This can be done using cliff sequences or digging holes and collecting materials. For underwater volcanoes, scientists usually have to rely on marine surveys and mapping technology like sonar. It's like a really complicated layer cake, said Pyle, a volcanologist and professor of earth science at the University of Oxford. Somebody's going to cook this pretty complicated cake and then bash it around and cut a hole in it. And if it's above water, you can just go and have a look at it. And if they dropped it in the bath, then you're really stuck. Well, now we know what an underwater volcano is. We're ready to talk about our news, the powerful eruption that occurred in early 2022. What really happened was that a volcano in the South Pacific decided to go nuts in January of 2022 and shattered two records simultaneously. The volcanic plume reached greater heights than any eruption ever captured in the satellite record, and the eruption generated an unparalleled number of lightning strikes, almost 590,000 over the course of 3 days. Atmospheric scientists said that this event was a hyperfuel for a mega thunderstorm because the amount of superheated moisture from the ocean made this eruption unprecedented. The plume went 2.5 times higher than any thunderstorm we have ever observed, and the eruption generated an incredible amount of lightning. This volcano has a name. We call it Tonga-Hunga Hapai. It lies about 65 kilometers north of the Tongan capital of Nuku'alofa and sits within the so-called Tonga Chromatic Volcanic Arc, a line of mostly underwater volcanoes that runs along the western edge of the Pacific plate of Earth's crust. For those of you who asked for the details, the eruption began on January 13th, launching explosions that broke the water surface and generating a major lightning event. Then on January 15th, rising magma from Tonga-Hunga Hapai met the seawater above the volcano, triggering a sudden and massive blast. Such explosive eruptions can occur when magma rapidly heats water into steam, which then quickly expands, Bubbles of volcanic gas caught within the magma also help to drive these dramatic blasts up and out of the water, Nature reported. Before moving on, be sure to like or dislike the video so that we can continue to improve and make these videos better for you, the viewer. Plus, be sure to subscribe to the channel by clicking the bell so that you don't miss any of our weekly videos. Underwater volcanic eruptions don't typically release large plumes of gas and particles into the air, but the January 15th eruption clearly was an exception to this rule. Not only people could see the plume expanding in real time, the best visual we have comes from satellites. The first one, GOES-17, which stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite 17, and the second one, Himawari-8 from Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, captured the unusual eruption from above, allowing scientists at NASA's Langley Research Center to calculate how far the plume penetrated the atmosphere. Having two satellites looking at the plume from different positions is not something that happens every day, especially when it comes to underwater volcano eruptions. Having two satellites means being able to recreate a three-dimensional picture of the clouds. This is exactly what scientists from NASA's Langley team did. Clouds determination suggested that at its highest point, the plume was 58 kilometers high in the air. This tells us something amazing. The plume literally pierced the mesosphere. The mesosphere is the third layer of the atmosphere, directly above the stratosphere and directly below the thermosphere. The exact upper and lower boundaries of the mesosphere vary with latitude and with the season, higher in winter and in the tropics, lower in summer and at the poles. But the lower boundary is usually located at altitudes from 50 to 65 kilometers. After an initial blast generated this towering plume, a secondary blast from the volcano sent ash, gas, and steam more than 50 kilometers into the air. However, the one from Hunga, Tonga is not an isolated volcano eruption event. For example, back in 1991, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines unleashed a plume that extended 35 kilometers above the volcano. And until the recent Tonga-Hunga Hapai eruption, that in 1991 event held the record for the largest known volcanic plume in the satellite record, the statement noted. Coming back to our January 2022 eruption, what happened to the plume when it reached the mesosphere was a quick transition into a gaseous state. But in the stratosphere below, gas and ash from the volcano accumulated and spread to cover an area of 157,000 square kilometers. This eruption seems to have created some sort of waves in the atmosphere. Such waves can influence the pattern of lightning strikes. That's why eruptions are so important to meteorologists. To study the lightning, the team is using data from GLD 360, a ground-based lightning detection network. This data revealed that of the nearly 590,000 lightning strikes that took place during the eruption, about 400,000 occurred within 6 hours after the big blast on January 15th. The contribution from the underwater volcano is therefore incredible. We are talking 67% of lightning strikes due to Tonga. Well, we've seen this eruption was really something out of this world. But do we know something about other eruptions that happened over the course of history and maybe prehistory? Well, although there's no way to map every possible volcanic event ever, especially when we're talking millions and millions of years, one big blast throughout history will always make its way into the room. Yellowstone National Park, some 640,000 years ago. The supervolcano's eruption shaped the national park, holding rank in scientific studies as the stuff of legend. Yellowstone's geysers and seismic activity are a constant reminder of what lurks beneath and that it can be dangerous. Another big eruption that we know about is the one of Mount Tambora, which is still active today. It was the most explosive volcanic event ever recorded by humans. The initial blasts back in April of 1815 were heard some 1,900 kilometers away. To put that into perspective, imagine hearing an explosion in Tampa Bay, Florida that occurred in New York City, and then add another 321 kilometers on top of that. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? Coming back to our Tonga eruption, we want to talk about something sad. The Tonga eruption happened just 65 kilometers from the Tongan capital of Nuku-Alafa. This has been a disaster for the more than 100,000 people living in the surroundings. They lost clean drinking water supplies, and they are currently working to clear away the thick layer of ash that blanketed everything. At least 3 people have died in Tonga as a result of the eruption. The thing is, earthquakes and eruptions will always continue to shake the region, and the volcanic danger will never really be over. Tonga-Hunga Hapai could remain active for some time, with uncertain effects on the people living there. Regardless of what the immediate future holds for this particular volcano, the eruption has volcanologists rethinking the hazards of submarine volcanoes more broadly. It's a stark reminder that these kinds of volcanoes exist and that they pose a hazard. Maybe a more detailed study could help us to better face this huge problem. As you can understand, the power of the earth and nature is something that we can't completely control. But with the help of science, we can lower the risks and better appreciate the beauty of the world we're living in. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. Are you scared of volcanic eruptions? Do you have a favorite volcano? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time on the channel.